Easy section, a lot of writing. It's about the best way I can describe it. What is a conditional statement? A statement that can be written in if then form. Why do you think they call it a conditional statement? Does anybody want to ponder a guess at that? Okay, I'll give you an example of one. If you take out the trash, then you get to go to the movies.
You can go to the movies if you pick up the trash.
Right.
If you do this.
So why do they call that a conditional statement, do you think?
Because you can only go if you on
What am I giving you?
one
Conditions, right? I'm giving you conditions of what to do. If you satisfy this condition, then what? This happens. So that's why it's a conditional statement. The statement is only true when the conditions happen, right? I guess that's kind of my thoughts. Basically, conditional statements will always be in the form that, which means if P, then Q. But that's what this means when you see that written down. That means if P, then Q. Let's write the conditional statement I just did. If you take out the trash, then you can go to the movies. What is the P part of this statement?
If you take out the trash.
If you take out the trash.
No, you take out the trash.
Oh, okay.
That is your P, which it is the first part, so it is called the hypothesis. What part is the Q?
Go to
You
the
can
Go to the movies. This part is called the
Conclusion.
The hypothesis, what you've got to do. If you do that, this conclusion should happen. Okay? When you're doing problems, and they ask you to find what is the hypothesis and conclusion of the following statement, I'll be fine with you writing this, then putting a box around and writing H, put a box around the conclusion and writing C. Okay? Can anyone think of other ways to say this? I would say, how about this? Taking out the trash means you get to go to the movies. Is that saying the exact same thing in a different way? Would you guys agree? Okay, so this is a conditional statement, it's just not written in if-then form. you'll find that a lot of these statements, can be written in the opposite order, but mean the same thing. Like, everybody look at the bottom of page 107. Look at, example B. So we have less to write down, we'll look at an example in the book. Right here, a number is divisible by 10 if its last digit is a 0. This is a problem sometimes people run into. What is the hypothesis? Is the hypothesis always going to be the first thing said?
No.
Yes.
No, it's not. It's always going to be what has to happen first for the result to happen, not what's written first in the sentence. As a result, the last digit has to be, for it to be divisible by 10, the last digit has to be 0. So how would you write this as an if-then statement? If the last digit is 0, then
It is divisible by 10.
the number is divisible by 10. So as you can see, even though the hypothesis was the last thing written in the sentence, it is the hypothesis, isn't it? Yeah.
You say if a number is divisible by 10, then its last digit is 0.
That is called the converse. And we'll get into that in just a second. Good question. This one was, up here was easy because it's already written in if-then form, isn't it? I mean, the ones that are with if and a then are really easy to identify the hypothesis and conclusion on. Sometimes they'll get a little more complicated. We're going to make a little, I guess, table, we will now. Okay. We've got the conditional, the converse, the inverse, and the contrapositive. Yeah, those are all really weird words, aren't they? It's a new language. I keep telling you guys that. You know, it's going to seem weird, but the concept of what these are is not difficult. First of all, the conditional is if P, then what? Q, right? This is as far as it's going to go, so you don't need to make this huge. All right, before you finish writing this, everybody look up here. Pencils down. So our conditional, if P, then Q. The converse is if Q, then P. So how do you think they relate to each other? Put whatever was the conclusion, make it the what? Whatever was the hypothesis, make it the what?
Conclusion.
That's what the converse is. The inverse. You guys remember what that means? Negation or not P, then not Q. Didn't we learn that in yesterday's assignment about negation or not? In our previous statement, the negation of this would be if you do not take out the trash, then you cannot go to the movies, right? Agreed?
Yes.
That would be the inverse of that particular conditional statement. So you just do the opposite. Contrapositive is to inverse what the converse is, the conditional. What do you think that means? Not Q, then not P. So these two deal with the nots, right?
Correct.
The original order and the what? Order flipped.
Yeah.
These deal with the unknots, the original order, and then what? Flipped. This looks complicated because it's in a symbolic form, but really when you think about it, it's a lot easier If you understand what this is saying to you, to write it like this, then to write, okay, put the thing at the first in the last, and the thing in the last in the first. Wouldn't that be complicated if you tried to describe this in words? What it actually means? But since we have these symbols, it's really a pretty easy concept. Put hypothesis as a conclusion, put the conclusion as the what?
Hypothesis.
Opposite of the hypothesis of your original statement, then the opposite of the conclusion of your original statement. And then vice versa, then flip it there. Make sense?
Yeah.
Write all three of these for this statement. I want you to write the converse, the inverse, contrapositive. The one thing to remember about this, nobody said that they had to make sense either. Okay? You'll write some of these things and think, God, that's stupid. It's okay. Nobody ever said that, they have to be, Try that and see what you get. And keep it simple. Don't make it harder than what it is. I'm going to freeze that, and I'm going to write what I would put. And sometimes you have to change the wording just a little to make it make sense or to have it proper, grammatically be proper. I already see I made some mistakes. I capitalized it and I shouldn't have on one of mine. So. Okay, anybody have a guess at what would you say the converse was?
I stay inside if it is hot.
If I stay
If then, if what? I stay inside, then it was what?
hot.
That's what I got. On the inverse, I said, if it is not hot outside, then I did not stay inside. Did you guys get that? Something basically just like that? Because the inverse is keep the same order, right? This was my P and this was my Q. That'll help you too sometimes. To acknowledge which one's your P, which one's your Q, right? So you know just where to stick it in the deal here. For the contrapositive, if I did not stay inside, then it was not hot. I'm sure there's a better way to say that, but I mean,
Do we have to always use if and then? Like,
That's what I was wondering. That's
Cause like,
I would.
you do, because when I wrote mine, like for the first one, I stay inside when it's hot. That's all I put.
Now, don't do that, but, I mean, you're on the right track, but just to make sure you're separating the hypothesis and the other, I would write your answers in if-then form, because more than anything, when they ask you things like that, like if you're taking an ACT test for one, they're probably gonna give it in if-then form.
Okay.
They're kinda wanting you to basically in your head put this in if-then form, and then flip it this way. I mean, you could, but let's put it this way, you're a lot more likely to be correct if you use it than full.
Okay.
Makes sense?
Bless you. What?
They don't get into a whole lot more, except to just talk about, if you look on page 110, talking about logically equivalent statements. If the conditional and the contrapositive are true, both true, then they're logically equivalent. And then if the converse and the inverse conditional are true, they're both logically equivalent, or if they're both false. If a conditional is true, the converse may or may not be true. Okay, there's some things as far as the truth value goes with that. Main thing is I want you to be able to write each of them. If you look, I do want you to look at, let's look at 109. I do want you to look at the truth table at the top there. I don't usually go through the book a lot, but I don't want to make you just have to write a bunch of stuff down. I'd really rather talk about the concept of it as much as anything else. See if this makes sense to you. A conditional statement. If P is true, wouldn't it make sense then, and Q is true, then P, then Q would be true, right?
Yes.
Because this has to happen in order for it to be true. Would you agree? Now, why would this not work? Why is it false here?
Because
Because in your statement, if this happens, then this has to happen, right? In the if-then statement.
so that's like saying.
So it's like saying, it was hot outside and I did go outside. Agree? So that would be kind of breaking the if-then statement. So that's why this is false. Now,
I don't understand that.
and this is odd here. Basically, if this is false, the conditional will always be considered true.
What?
Let me look at that again and I'll get back to you on that.
I read that little box and that's what it says.
I don't understand
Yeah, I don't.
why you have to put two true, two false almost every time on column B. I don't understand.
Well, the good news is truth tables aren't on your EOI.
Thank God.
Well, I thought the truth tables yesterday were pretty easy. These can be a little confusing. And we'll look at that and we'll get back into it later, but, main thing to remember is that you're able to find the what? From the conditional, find the what?
The
Converse, the inverse, and the what?
Contrapositive.
Contrapositive. Okay?